Welcome back to the workshop. I'm going to start a series on dados, grooves, and rabbets. Three terms that you hear a lot in woodworking and some of the tools that can do those. This comes from a knowledge of having done woodworking for several years, but I have a couple books here that are really good for referencing. These books, the Woodworking Hand Tool books by Graham Blackburn, are both very good. They talk about all these tools. They explain all these different terms. And so I got these as a gift from my wife, but they're really good information for what we're doing in woodworking. So I'm going to talk about some of the tools that can be used, and we're going to use this simple piece of wood, piece of pine, to talk about some of those things. Dados, which run across the grain, usually somewhere inside, often like a bookcase. The shelf of a bookcase would be dadoed in. Rabbets run along the edges, either with the grain or against it. It doesn't really matter as long as it's along the edge and sort of provides a step up type of configuration. And then a groove happens within the wood, but is usually with the grain. And there's more specifications than that I'll go into in just a moment. The difference between a rabbet and a groove is very simple. A rabbet is along the edge of the board, and it is generally wider than it is deep. A groove, which is inside the board, is deeper than it is wide. And so that's a good way of thinking about that. With these different tools, we have a plow plane, a dado plane, a rabbet plane, and a router plane. You can do these different slots, grooves, dados, rabbets into the wood. The dado plane, which has your cutter and usually a chip breaker, not chip breaker, it would be a grain, basically, because you're going against the grain, it is going to start slicing the grain in front of you so you don't have tear out, and it has a depth stop. The dado plane is almost primarily for making dados, and usually you're going to use it for making through dados, when the dado goes through. If it's inside, a lot of the boxes I do, they are just inside. I showed one in my router plane video recently. I can get one of those. There we go. This is an example of a dado inside of a piece, and I did that mainly with a chisel. So that's an example. But if you're going to go straight through, if you're going to make a Dutch chest, the Dutch chest has a dado about right here on this board here. There's a dado that goes clean through. That's, for a lot of people, that's the first time they ever make a dado and they ever use any of these tools because of what is required. It can be through because you've got a front and a back that cover the ends. And so that can be done with the dado plane. It can also be done with the router plane. And I think I used the router plane for making that, as I showed in that other video. Okay, taking this board, I'm going to lay out where I would like to have the dado. And we're going to do a 3/4 inch dado. I got the speed square, I'm just going to use that. Oh, There are other ways of doing this. All right, so this is where we're going to put our dado. We use a carcass crosscut saw for this. Now, sometimes I have arrangements where I have blocks of wood or something like that I might use to make it easier. I'm not going to really do that right now because this is kind of a quick one. I'm going to use this razor blade or X-Acto knife to form the sides of the dado. Basically what I'm doing is I'm cutting the grain to establish where it's going to go. Well, all right. Okay, so I have a chisel. The way I want to do this, I want to go in at the ends, because if you try to go this way and not come in the end, you could have tear out. We don't want that. So a little below the top. That takes care of that one. And of course, before you start, you want to know, obviously, how deep you're going to go. So you don't want to go all the way to the depth that you're going to use when you start. And this will be the best way of doing it rather than just sticking something in and going to town, because at this very beginning, you've got a lot of stuff you're working with. Establishing your walls. From the other direction. Well, see, tear out. That's what happens when you didn't cut it down far enough. But again, like I said, this is scrap, so it doesn't matter as much. However, I am going to reinforce that a little bit. All right, so here's the dado plane. We need to get sure that that piece is down where we want. We can adjust the depth stop if we want. Blade is out. And it does fit. Yeah, it does fit. I'm going to use this end of it to sort of fence against that one end. Make sure it's tearing stuff out back there. Matt did a really good job of cleaning some of this out. That's dado plane. The router plane can do the same thing. That's a little far down. The router plane does live up to its name, and it will route right through something. And of course, when you get to the end, you have to be careful that you don't tear out more than you want. But I have found the router plane is really good for cleaning up along the edges in a way that the dado doesn't do as well. course, maybe it's because this is a newer plane and it's sharper. It's always a very real possibility. I'm going to turn the board around. Let's see what the Dado can do right there. Yeah, it cleaned out both sides very well. All right, well, except for our little blemish here, otherwise you've got a Dado, which is wider than it is deep.